All right, we're keeping it real with Jason Khalipa and Mark Moss. We want to talk today about men's health, really is what I want to talk about. Not the aspects of mental health and fitness and how those all tie together. Me and Mark from Uplift have been wanting to get together for a long time, but as somebody who has sort of struggled with delayed adolescence, I guess you would call it, discipline, drug addiction, all those things in my past, kind of an important topic to me. So we were kind of holding out to get somebody who we felt like it was an authority on the topic. And Jason was kind enough to reach out to me. I'd sent him a message, and obviously this is your wheelhouse, man. This is what you do these days.
I don't know about that, but
it seems like it, man. Everything I'm listening to is like, you sound like Jocko out there.
Oh man. Oh boy. All right. Well, here we go.
So now you got a lot to live up to. All right. So let's do some intros here. Mark, why don't you give us kind of the background of Uplift and what you do and what you're looking to do with Uplift?
Yeah, man. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. And Jason, it's obviously a pleasure to be on with you, man. I dapped you up at Rogue 2 years ago. We made eye contact, and I was like, he's coming my way. I guess I don't know what to do. So but yeah. So my name is Mark. I live in Louisiana. We started Uplift a couple years ago. So backstory: my granddad committed suicide in 2013. And it was just one of those things that kind of hit us by surprise. And, we didn't expect it. Nobody in my family really expected it. And so it was just kind of a tough time. I mean, the past 10, 12 years, it doesn't get easier. Time just goes by. And so we started Uplift with the idea of, hey, let's have two friends over. Let's work out and just kind of get some things off our brain. And so my wife, she's my backbone, man. She's awesome. And so she said, no, do something bigger than two of your friends going to work out in the garage. So one of my buddies owns a t-shirt shop. And so we started printing shirts, selling the shirts, and all the proceeds that we raised went to a foundation. On the past 2 years, it was the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. This year upcoming, we have Warrior Wad, and they take care of veterans. Instead of prescribing or having them take prescription medications, they introduce exercise into their life, as well as a nutrition coach and a mentor, a veteran mentor. That way, that portion of their life, like with the prescription medications, kind of goes away. And so, basically for this year, we have Adrian Bosman. Jason, you may know him. He's programming our workout for this year. And it's kind of like a Murph type idea where we all come together as a community. We throw down together, and, you never know somebody's story. You never know what may hit them at that time. And so, it's like a big CrossFit community event that we're kind of putting on. We have the shirt sales, and I have the new shirt on right now that we just got in, but all the proceeds and whatnot goes straight to Warrior Wad to help them.
That's awesome. I didn't know about the Warrior Wad part, nor about the prescription medication part, which I want to get into with you guys here in a little bit. Jason, I know you, and a lot of people know you from your CrossFit background. You've won the CrossFit Games. Was that, my CrossFit history is a little bit lacking. It was 2010?
8. So
2008.
I won in 08, and then I took second and third in 13 and 14. And so I competed there for almost a decade. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So a lot of people know you for that, but you've branched out into a lot of other things. You've got the gyms, and it looks like you're still doing a lot of CrossFit style stuff, although not necessarily married to CrossFit anymore. Could you give us a little bit of the background of what you're up to these days and what your fitness regimen looks like at your gyms and in your personal life?
Yeah. So I competed professionally in CrossFit for about a decade. I worked for CrossFit HQ. I used to teach seminars for them. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff in the CrossFit space. And, in 2016, I retired from the sport. My daughter got sick, and so I retired from the sport, and I found jiu-jitsu at the same time. And so I've been doing jiu-jitsu for about 8 years. I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I found tactical games and shooting sports a couple of years ago. So now I do a lot of shooting. And it's a combination of fitness, shooting, jujitsu, and basically fitness that I do on a regular basis. And I'd say where I'm at currently is evaluating my particular goals and trying to help other men live the same lifestyle. So, I met my wife at 15. We just celebrated our 15-year wedding anniversary. I have 2 children, a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old. Just like many other people, we've gone through some adversity. And why I train now is not because I want to win the CrossFit Games, because I want to train so I could protect and provide. And those are 2 like really important cornerstones of my life. And I want to help other men be able to do that. And so when I think about protect, a lot of people think like, oh, it's shooting and combatives. And it's like, yeah, that's something I do, but I wouldn't even put that even close to what that means for me to protect. The likelihood of me having to run after my child or save them in a situation is much more likely than me having to get into a physical altercation or to use a firearm. And so I think being able to run, jump, climb, lift, especially as a man, is super important. And then I also talk about this idea of providing. And to me, it means providing experiences for the kids. So going out, doing things with them, being able to always say yes and not say no because I physically can't do something with them. If they, this morning I went to the beach with my daughter, it's like, I don't have to worry about walking down the cliff, right? It doesn't bother me. So those are what I'm focused on. And so every week I host free men's club workouts. We do them in a parking lot. We typically get about 50, 60 guys to come in, throw down a parking lot. It's dirty, it's nasty, and that's exactly where we want it. And then I also own gyms. So I've owned gyms for almost 20 years, which is not quite the same thing, right? The gyms are super nice. The parking lot is not.
That's awesome. I did want to follow up. I've seen the stuff for the CrossFit Games. You're going to be there. What are you doing there? If you don't mind me getting the lowdown on that.
Yeah, so I'll be at the CrossFit Games. I'm actually a part of the affiliate council, so I will be doing some meetings there with like actually CrossFit. But for the most part, I'll be off site at a place called Tana Hills, and I'll be doing men's club workouts that are completely free in the mornings, and then I'm gonna be doing some jujitsu, some open mat grappling.
I might have to check that out. I still don't have any workout plans.
Yeah, so it's Friday and Sunday morning at 7 a.m. You should definitely come.
Okay,
for sure.
Perfect. Yeah, I heard I think the run swim event is really early on Thursday. So I'm glad it's Friday because if possible, I want to catch that run swim, but we'll see what happens there. Okay. Going back to you. This is kind of a broad question, but Mark, do you think that I kind of want to hear you guys both chime in on this a little bit and then we'll kind of hone it in. Do you think that we have a crisis with young men at this point in this particular country as far as understanding manhood and what that entails?
Yeah, I definitely do. My wife and I always talk about this, where the importance of a dad in a home is so vital to an upbringing. So I know for me and basically my whole family lineage had a strong father in the house. And I think that's something that's extremely vital, especially today, because that taught me early on what I need to do in terms of, kind of like Jason was saying, how to provide and how to protect your kids and the future generations. So I think that's a big thing. And for me, my faith, I'm pretty grounded in my faith, and the Bible clearly spells out how important, a father is in a home and things like that. So I definitely think that it's important, and we are kind of in a, tough time right now.
Yeah. It's hard for me to judge compared to other times because I didn't live in those times, but we have some clues along the way, and we have some historical things, and we have stories passed down from our parents and things like that. But Jason, would you say that it's an all-out crisis for young men these days, or are you a little bit more hopeful?
I don't know if I'd use the word crisis. I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
It's hard to say. So I have a 10-year-old son, right?
Yeah.
And I see firsthand the people that we surround ourselves with. And I think that, it really comes down to the parents. I think the biggest problem right now is that we are not exposing our children to adversity. And I think that's our biggest problem, is that whether it's in the gym, on the mats, in sports, it's so important to get exposed to micro dose of adversity, because life will come and it will come kick you. And I think as a parent, it's important to expose our children to hard things because they can learn how to overcome them better. And I think that in today's day and age, where the difficulty is, and every generation has different difficulties, right? But our biggest difficulty is the fact that it's so comfortable. That's our biggest problem. So our biggest problem as a society is that things have gotten so comfortable that when we get struck with adversity, we can't handle it. And that in particular revolves around children. You know, think about it compared to like even, let's just say 50 years ago, right? Not even that long, right?
Nope.
Or 100 years ago. Right now, we have air conditioning. We have access to every single thing we need in our pocket at all given times. We are rarely exposed to hots and colds, and we have transportation that gets us anywhere we want to go. And so because of that, you know, we're not walking 5 miles to get to school in the cold. We're not learning how to overcome those things. And so I think that as parents, we've gotten a little bit comfortable. Children have definitely gotten comfortable. And as a byproduct, when life throws them a curveball, they're not as prepared to handle it. And so what can we do? We need to recognize that there's pros and cons to this technology and this lifestyle. And we need to expose our children to hard things. And I think sports is a great way to do that.
I have a follow-up on that. This is interesting. So I told you guys that I struggled in the past. So I've actually struggled a few times. So I come from a background of being addicted to opiates for about 9 years. I don't think I've actually said that publicly since doing content creation. I've mentioned it on a few forums and whatnot, but I'm fine with that. It's been 9 years since, but I was kind of the classic case of being at the parents' house at age 27, not really making any money for myself. And I don't know, one day I just woke up and a lot of it had to do with, I didn't really know what to do. So I just started waking up early. I started running. I started working out. I didn't have a job at the time. So that's all I could do is start to, like you said, Jason, do hard things. Right. But you know, there's been other adversities along the way, almost these micro setbacks. I would say I had such bad habits for so long. When I got married, for instance, I was pretty disciplined, but then marriage is a new circumstance that you have to deal with, right? You're living with this other person. And early on, we had to get counseling. And then you brought up everything we've got everything, access to everything in our pocket, basically through our cell phones. That's one that has recently come up for me, interestingly enough. Right when I think I'm doing good at everything, I start doing content creation. I notice myself being on my phone a little bit too much. Jason, do you have any advice or guidelines for how to set boundaries as young men for how much social media you take in and what you use it for?
Oh man, that's a difficult question, especially for guys like me, right? Where we create so much content that it's a lot of what we do for work revolves around content creation, whether that's podcasts, YouTube, social. And so it is something that's definitely on the forefront of my mind. And frankly, it's actually one of the biggest things that I'm focusing on right now is how do you prioritize content creation in blocks and then share it and then basically forget about it instead of like constantly trying to create content all day, every day. It becomes very exhausting and it doesn't allow you to focus on other things. So that's currently something I'm really focused on. I think just being aware of it as it is a huge step in the right direction. And then, you know, one thing I'd say for the youth, and this is at least something I'm trying with my son, is like, and granted, he's not super driven by social, so maybe that's why it works, but just trying to get him as busy as possible, like trying to keep him as busy as possible with different sports and different things we could do so he doesn't feel bored and need to be distracted by these other things.
That's good. That's good and relatable. Because like I said, that's a struggle for me right now. And I'm just figuring out some boundaries so I make sure that I'm not, like you said, in blocks, right? It's a very new thing for me, but it is something that I want to pursue. And so it's kind of, like you mentioned, getting that stuff done and then shutting down and being with your family. What about you, Mark? You do a lot on social media as well, especially as you're kind of launching Uplift. I'm seeing you guys everywhere. You got games athletes wearing your shirts. I see Meme for Time. I think I saw him wearing your shirt. You know, was it Scott Tetlow? Is that who had it on? Yeah. I mean, you're everywhere, man. Yeah. It looks like you've got a good relationship with CrossFit. A lot of those guys getting involved. So part of what you do, you've got to be visible. You've got to be on social media as well. For you, have you learned any tricks along the way, or is that something that's still evolving for you as well?
Hey, man, you know, I'm super blessed and fortunate to have somebody in my corner who kind of does all that for me. I'm not technologically savvy at all, and she can attest to that.
Yeah.
But man, I'm super blessed with the people around me. And my wife's a photographer, and so she kind of has that eye for it too. I mean, I'm so black and white. So my day job, I do benefit administration for a company, and so I see black and white. I don't see any color. And so the folks that surround me, yeah, I know my weaknesses, and that's okay. But the folks that surround me see all kinds of color. And so, obviously I do look at social media, and I have a 12, a 5, and a 4-year-old. And
Wow.
so a 12-year-old doesn't have a phone. He got that privilege taken away from him. Um, but it would consume him whenever he did have it. It did.
Yeah.
He would get irritated whenever we tell him to go do something. So we eliminated that from his life. And now he's how I used to grow up, where we were always outside. And so he goes outside and shoot hoops and hits golf balls and throws sticks and, whatever kids do. But I'm fortunate to have people around me that kind of take that burden away from me.
Yeah, that strikes a chord with me. I mean, when we talk about manhood, obviously a huge part of that is parenting, and something that you said just strikes a chord with me. I still feel new to it. I have one, and she's 6, and there's new things happening, new attitudes and things like that. And I've noticed we do limit screen times and things like that, but I do notice it affect her sometimes. And I guess my question would be what he just said. Jason, have you had any experiences with your kids where you've seen them? When I see my Ella in an obsessive state, or a state that I know I try to avoid, it's so hard to sometimes communicate when there's that communication gap between a 6-year-old and a grown adult. Have you had that experience with any of your kids? And
Yeah, I think.
What do you do?
Yeah, and I think that just owning it and apologizing at times is the way to go with your kids. Like, hey, if you, like, for example, I think I messed up. I said, hey, Kaden, if you do, I think we were like, I don't know, we mow the lawn for this many days. We do this, we do that. I'll get you a PlayStation 2 or a PlayStation, because all of his friends would be on there and playing like Madden together, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I kind of sold myself on this idea that like it's a way to connect when the sun goes down. You can like do this with all his friends. And then he ended up talking me into getting him access to Fortnite. And I was like, fuck. I was like, I don't know. And, we kind of talked about it as a family, and we're like, all right, well, all of his other friends are on it. So I kind of got convinced. And then I just saw like a complete change, where he would normally sleep in on the weekends, like pretty late. Like he's going through some growing spurts, but he would be getting up like at 6 with me. And like, I'd be like, bro, what are you doing? And he'd be like, oh, I'm going to go play Fortnite. I was like, whoa. And then you started to see his attitude start to change. And it happened like overnight. And it was a really, really good lesson for me, that how addicted you could become. And it was my own fault, because I allowed him to have access to these things. And just him getting up like abnormally early and his mood shifting, it just like, it was so black and white for me that we're like, look, we got to stop this. And so that's been an example where, as a parent, we tried something, it wasn't the right move. And what we could have done better from the beginning is create like really strict guidelines. I think that we tried to, you give an inch, they take a mile. And I think I should have just been like, look, you get access to this remote for an hour a week. Like, you know what I mean? That's what I should have done. But we kind of like, well, you could play on the weekends if your friends are involved, it just went too far.
Man, that's so important. Overall, my dad was a good dad. But one of the things is he had such a hard time backtracking or apologizing. I remember that I used to have to, you would see it in his eyes that he'd made a mistake. He'd overreacted, grounded me for like a month for something small. And I'd have to sit there and like almost beg for forever, until finally he like sheepishly retracted it. So what you're talking about is humility. And it's such a key thing for manhood, not just to have that strength, but to be able to lower yourself and go to your wife or go to your kids and say, I messed this up. If you can't do that, you can't evolve. You cannot get better. You almost have to have these small failures. They're going to come your way. And if you don't deal with them in a humble manner, you'll never learn.
Yeah. I mean, that was my experience. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I always tell Aiden, he's the 12-year-old. I said, dude, you're going to screw up. I said, and when that time comes, I said, you got to run run to your problems. This is what my dad and one of my bosses told me. He said, you got to run to your problems, admit that you're wrong, say you're sorry and how you're going to change. So you run to your problems and then you run to your opportunities. But that's one thing that always stuck out to me. If I run to my problems and fix it right then, it's not going to blow up into something bigger than what it is. You acknowledge that it's an issue, and then you make the change and you apologize if you need to.
That's really good.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things we're seeing, like, you know, and one of the things I think that helps is like talking to other people. You know, one of the things I'm trying to do more with my son, more and more and more, is surround him with other men that have good values, good characteristics. So not just getting it from me. And he gets that from great coaches, which we're super blessed. But also just good dads around him, you know, and one of the best things about the men's club that I host every week is that you meet a bunch of really good guys. And so like my son knows no other than like on the weekends, he'll see, you know, 20, 30 guys will come, you know, back up to my house later or whatever. Maybe not that much. Like we'll go to coffee and then maybe later on, some of the guys will come over, like 10 of them. And he'll just be surrounded by guys that are prepared to get up at 5 a.m. to go work out, who probably are trying to live a lifestyle where they're trying to reach their potential. And I think surrounding yourself with boys like that and having other men be humble enough to admit when they, hey, like, look, I tried this. It wasn't the right move. And I admitted to my child, like, you know, that's it. Because no one's perfect and they need to know that too.
That's good. And it brings me to something else. Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't think I could have made the turnaround. One of the first things I did when I woke up, basically at my parents' house, no job, playing video games all the time, on drugs, is that I went to somebody I knew from church and I just told him everything, right? And he took me under his wing, and that led to other people being in my life. There's no way I would have turned it around and had a good job and a family and striving to be a better man if I didn't have people who held me accountable. On my own, I would have probably slipped back into the same habits, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing better, by the way. A really good friend of mine, two of the guys in my wedding party got addicted to opiates, and one of them overdosed. That sucked. And the other one just really ruined his life. I mean, he could still bounce back, but it's really it's such an addictive thing, and it's very, very difficult when you're in relationships with people who suffer from this, because anyways, I don't need to tell you, but like it's been very, very difficult to watch. One of the only upside to having two really close friends of mine go through that is that real time, my children were able to see these people, and hopefully they recognize just what drugs did to their life, and maybe it'll impact them not to go, you know, even get involved at all. But I'm glad you're doing so much better, because I've seen it not go that way. So kudos to you.
Yeah, it's a nasty drug. I don't exactly remember my mindset, but I do remember one thing. You take somebody who already doesn't have discipline. So I'm already feeling unfulfilled on the inside, right? I don't have the tools. Get that person addicted to opiates. Now I got myself addicted, but then being in that situation, having to get yourself out, it almost doesn't just require the normal amount of discipline. It requires more, because you have to go through a period of obviously physical withdrawal. And then for a long time after that, you're just not right. I mean, to this day, there's always consequences for the things you do. To this day, my testosterone's on the lower side, likely because of that. It definitely messed up some brain cells. You know, it's in my past, but I remember the biggest thing was that you are doing the things that you do. When you hear about people stealing and things like that, I do take responsibility for those things. But man, there is such a terrifying fear of the feeling that you face when you run out. It's so potent. And really, a lot of the things that you're doing, that you hear of people doing, is out of this terrifying fear of basically just feeling like hell. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. So, and that's what, look, that you mentioned it yourself, having your son see that. That's why this stuff is so important. And that's why I can't go back and change my failures, but I have a daughter, and we're trying for another. We're getting a little bit older, but we'll see what happens. You know what I can do? I can still leave a legacy with my children, and I can still affect other people around me. I have CrossFitter friends. I have some friends who are 18, 19 years old who are on the right path. And whenever I see them veer off just a little bit, I can be a warning sign for them. So I have a question that has kind of been nagging at me. I'll go to you first on this one, Jason. What do you do with and have you known anyone like this, with the 30-year-old man child who has the first step of realizing I've screwed it all up? He wants to change. He has never learned discipline in his life. Where do you start with someone like that? And have you ever experienced that with anybody in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a complicated and a simple question. I think it's working out. I think it's training hard. That's what I think.
That's what I was getting at too.
And I know that like it's so much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But at the heart of everything, I think lies training, exposing yourself to adversity on your own terms, starting the day off with a win and putting points on the scoreboard. And I think that understanding what's in your control versus out of your control through training, understanding how to utilize positive self-talk through training. Training unlocks so many more benefits mentally than even I'd say physically. Like everybody knows you're going to get better blood markers and maybe you'll get a 6-pack or whatever you want. But I think that training allows you to show up for your family, your friends, your community, not only as a competent asset, but also as the right state of mind. So I would, if I had this 29-year-old, 30-year-old kid living on their parents' couch, I would say, wake your ass up every day at 5 a.m., go train hard. And what it'll do is it will start building your confidence that's earned so that you don't want to just go sit on the couch for the rest of the day. You want to go be productive, but that is the initial catalyst.
I remember it was a good tired when I started working out. I was tired, but it gave me that first dose of the right type of dopamine, right? Like I accomplished something that was going to lead to results. I could tell it was going to benefit me. Jason, you're exactly right. I mean, for me, that was the first thing. That was the only thing I could do. I didn't have a job, so I had to look for a job. But in the meantime, I started getting up for me, it was 6 a.m. and I started working out, getting the quick wins. You know, Jordan Peterson says, make your bed. I actually started doing that. What about you, Mark? I have a question for you. Is that something that when we talk about mental health issues and depression, is that something that runs through your family, or is that something that was specific to him? Is that something that you've dealt with or anybody close to you has dealt with?
So, in relation to like my bloodline, no. My wife actually tried to commit suicide whenever she was 13 years old. And so it's crazy, kind of like our testimony together where, you know, my grandfather did it. And so we're kind of the remaining family members left over. And then she tried, and now she's kind of seeing the fruits of what a life can be and what a life should be together. And so we kind of share our testimonies, and we've done a couple podcasts, and it's hopefully helps, you know, some people. We always say if it helps one person, then everything that we're doing through Uplift is all worth it. Going back to the exercise and whatnot. So whenever my granddad did commit suicide, I didn't know how to channel it. So I was 22-year-old in college. And so, you know, you just think of every kind of situation of what could I have done different, or why I should have been there, you know, this and that. And so what I did is I channeled my like exercise, and that helped me through everything. And so I would just tell my mom, hey, I'm going outside for a run, or hey, I'm going to the track. And I think I did Murph like way too many times probably in that span of my life, but
Yeah.
It cope with, you know, what was going on and help me get through it, releasing, you know, everything. So
You mentioned prescription medication. I didn't actually know that about Warrior Wad. That hits close to home for me too. I was definitely on too many medications at one point. I've been able to get off antidepressants and things like that. I'm not completely against medicine. I think it has its place. I think usually it's something temporary. You mentioned microdose, Jason, and you know, the way that I wish I could tell you that I was the guy who went cold turkey off of opiates, but for me, you guys are probably familiar with Suboxone, methadone, things like that. I actually used Suboxone and took the pain or the withdrawal in doses. I went fairly quickly. I used it for like 3 months and got off because I had tried unsuccessfully before cold turkey. So not a huge proponent of that in particular, but I think it works in some circumstances. Can you speak, Mark, a little bit to the medication aspect of it and what your feelings are on that versus learning discipline, getting in the gym, and the balance there?
you know, My wife could probably speak more to that than me. I know at one point in her life, she was on, all types of stuff, and it just messed with her head so badly. I've been fortunate enough for the people around me and myself to never rely upon any of those things. And so I kind of ground myself in my faith and with church, and I was always grounded in that. And so, I kind of had that outlet as well as fitness growing up. And so Jason, I don't know if you have any opinion on that or not.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to medications, I think, it's hard. If you had asked me a year or two ago, I probably would have said, you could solve all world's problems with just training and eating better.
Yeah.
But I think that's I don't want to use the word, that's a naive way of looking at it. It isn't, I think many problems can be solved with, working out, training hard, and eating well. I think that it's hard to be super mentally fit if you're not physically fit, but you could be physically fit and not mentally fit. I do believe that. And I think that it's important to note that medication is a potential means to an end. We've had some experience with this for some of my family. And I think that especially like antidepressants and mood stabilizers, I think there's definitely a place for it when it really reaches a certain pinnacle. But I think the goal should be always to, as swiftly as possible, get off of them. So that's where I would say. And I think that, you just don't want it to become a crutch that you use for the rest of your life. You want it to be a tool that you use for a means to an end, right? To get to a place where you are happy, content, fulfilled, without forms of medication. And that includes drugs, alcohol, whatever else. I think that when adversity strikes, whether it's, a death in the family or whatnot, the first order of business should not be to gravitate towards stimulus that numb you. And I think that that's an unfortunate place to go. And I know a lot of people do that. Right. And it's hard, but it's like, I was giving a seminar the other day to a law enforcement agency, and a gentleman stood up and he's like, "Hey man, what would you say to someone who's, drinking, doing drugs every day to kind of get through the job?" And I would say, well, I would just ask that person, like, what is your long-term, like, what's the long-term plan there? Do you visualize yourself doing this same thing for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years? And if the answer is no, because it's not sustainable, well, let's take steps to a more sustainable solution, which might be reducing that a little bit and improving your overall health and wellness through training and nutrition. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, like, I think that there's a place for it. Western medicine is key, I think, but you shouldn't use it forever unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, that was always, like I said, I've used it as a tool before, and I stayed on it too long, which made it a little bit difficult to get off some of those things. Not what I'd mentioned earlier, but the antidepressants and things like that. One of the things that always hit me, though, was from a practical standpoint, I don't expect things to hit the fan, but what if they do hit the fan? Suddenly you're on 7 medications and crazy stuff is going on and you don't have access to those medications. Now I'm not able to be at my most efficient self, my best self, to protect my family. Like you mentioned, that was always a fear of mine, Jason, especially at the beginning of marriage when I knew Amber, my wife, was pregnant and things like that. I was on medications, and I remember thinking, what if it hits the fan one day? We had riots going on and stuff, the George Floyd stuff. I said, if I'm ever able not to get my medication, or if we're out of town for a long period of time and I forget it, now I'm not able to be the best dad and husband because I'm dependent on this thing. But it also did help me. So I agree with you. I just wanted to get off as well, rather than be stuck on it for the rest of my life.
Well, I think that's the right mentality, right? Is you don't want to be dependent on anything long term, and you just, I mean, medication wise, right? You don't want to have to. That's one of the reasons why I've never tried TRT. Like, I'm not anti testosterone. I mean, fuck, go ahead. But I've never done it because what's the long-term vision? Am I going to be taking TRT for the rest of my life? Unless I'm committed to it, I don't want to start doing it.
I did it and I got off, which that was fun getting off. Just kidding. It absolutely wasn't. The way I would describe it was, and mine was really low. I alluded to it. They think it was from opiate use. I had to get a bunch of tests and stuff. I had to take a nap in my car at work. I was trying my best, man. But we got an hour lunch and I'd go take a nap in my car. I was exhausted every day. Took all these tests and whatnot. And They couldn't figure anything out. And finally my T came in at like 100 and something. I think it's from the opiate use. So it's pretty bad. I got on it. It messed with my fertility, which wasn't worth it. So I got off, and I don't know if, I believe in God as well. And I don't know if God was trying to teach me what it's like when, maybe once a month I say to my wife, oh, I see what's going on here. I know what time it is, why this is going on. Cause that's what I felt like coming off of TRT. It was insane. Like it felt like I was on my period, and it was horrible.
Huh.
And yeah, there's just a certain, the other way I would describe it was that certain intensity you get it came back, but for a long time, that certain intensity in the gym, I used to be able to work out by myself, and I was competing against myself. I didn't need any other motivation. For a long time, I couldn't work out by myself. The only thing that kept me going was working out against the people in my CrossFit class and not wanting to lose, basically. That sort of drive went away. So yeah, I agree with you, man. I definitely am not sure if I will stay off or go back on, but I feel good now. So I'm doing okay. That's an interesting one. So Mark, I have, Jason mentioned when crisis hits, and it got me thinking, and we'll get you guys off here in the next 5 to 7 minutes, but something got me thinking here about, when crisis hits. And essentially what was going on in my head is that this training, or like he said, this micro dose of dealing with hard things, it prepares us for what happens when somebody close to you dies. I've thought about this a lot. And the reason why is I haven't had any huge crisis. I haven't had anybody that close to me ever die. Now you had this huge crisis, and I'd like to know, do you feel like you were prepared at that time to deal with it with the habits you formed, or is that something that you've had to do since then in order to prepare yourself for whatever may come at your way in the future?
I don't know if anybody's actually truly prepared for that specific situation. Whenever I was 10 years old, my other grandfather passed away due to cancer. And so, I experienced, and I was super close to him as well. So I experienced that loss whenever I was that young. And then, I always grew up playing sports. And so the adversity was always there. And I played a sport that was probably not suited for a short white kid. I always played basketball. And so adversity always struck every time you step onto the court, in an athletic sense. But I don't think you're ever really prepared for that news of, hey, your granddad just took his life. It took me a while to cope with it. I was in college. I was going into my finals week, and I freaking I trashed those tests. Like I don't think I've made a A on any of them or a B on any of them. It was just my mental game was all jacked up, and really it's taken me to get married to my wife and share her story, and we kind of bounce. We're good for each other, we kind of balance each other out. But really, it's just been the past couple of years where I've started feeling comfortable talking about it. And that's kind of Uplift all got going, is because, suicide is a real thing. Mental health is a real thing. And some people you would never know. Like my granddad, he was called, his nickname was always Be Smiley. That was his nickname. And so he was always happy. He's always lucky. And you would never think of somebody like that. But you hear so many times where comedians are the ones who take their life.
Yeah.
And you're guys are the happiest people ever. Like they're trying to make people laugh, and you just never know. And so that's why the Uplift thing all got going, is because I wanted to make a point of, you never know what somebody's going through, and it doesn't cost anything to be kind to other people and to care about other people and serve other people.
That's good. You're right. It is real. I guess I didn't share this, but it didn't go away. And when I mentioned, I don't know if it's just because it runs in my family. I don't know what it is. I am more prone to ups and downs than other people. It's that simple. Other people, I envy people who stay at a 4, 5, 6 and kind of can stay in that range. It really does feel chemical. Maybe it was from my drug use. I don't know. But once or twice a year for 3 days, a week, it's been a month. One time I even had to take off work for a little bit. But I had money in the bank because I was good at my job and I worked hard, where they were able to deal with that. But you just get hit with it. I can't even describe it. It's like everything goes numb. You just aren't seeing things clearly. And if it wasn't for the habits that I built beforehand, I wouldn't be able to get through those things.
Yeah.
Which kind of, I wanted to ask you as well, Jason, before we get out of here on some closing type statements. I think the reason I keep honing in on this crisis thing, and I think one reason I'm even kind of drawn to your story, Mark, is that I do have some fears. My biggest fear is being a failure to my family. I'm going to say that straight up. I don't know if you should you be driven by, is it okay to be driven by fear? Like, is it okay to go to the gym and to work? Maybe rather than a 9 out of 10 as far as fear, maybe if you're at that 6 to 10 where it's more of an urgency bordering on fear. I don't know. Jason, is it okay to be motivated by fear of failing your family?
Yeah, I think I would reframe that.
Okay.
I think fear is a strong term. Maybe strong is not the right term there, but it's just I think fear places a negative connotation on it. I would reframe it as reaching your potential, right? So your fear is of failure, right? But really what you're talking about is a desire to look back 20, 30, 40 years from now and say, I reached my potential. That's really what you're saying. Not to put words in your mouth, but
no, you're
at
right.
least that's what I'm saying to me, right? What I'm saying to me is that my fear of failure is actually my fear, or whatever you want to call it, of not reaching my potential later on in life. When I'm 70, 80, 90, I want to look back and be like, I did the thing. I showed up. I put in my best effort to compete as an athlete, to show up as a dad, to be the staple husband that I desire to be. And I find that the way that you justify that, or the way that you do that, is through micro goals. You know, when you have big macro goals, I think that's very important. I set macro goals all the time. Competing in the CrossFit Games, starting a new business, opening new gyms, competing in tactical games, jujitsu, you name it. I set these goals because they're pillars for me to go out and shoot for. But along that journey, you could then have micro goals where you could evaluate, hey, how am I doing, right? How did I do today as a husband, a father, an entrepreneur, an athlete? And if every day you're asking yourself these micro goals and you're saying, I did pretty damn good, or maybe, hey, I could have improved here, let me fix that tomorrow. You're never going to wake up one day and be like, shit, I messed up all these years, because you've been doing daily check-ins. And so that resolves your fear, because you're having intentional daily check-ins on a micro basis. That leads you to your macro goal of reaching your potential.
That's good.
That's really good. Yeah. And that does resonate with me. I remember early on in my marriage, I said, I had got disciplined on my own. Then I moved in with my wife, and I don't think I was a good husband for the first half of our marriage. We've been married for 7 years. I had to face that with humility, and I had to apologize to her. And it was the funniest thing. I apologized to her, and it's sort of, it was something she had pushed to the side. And by apologizing to her, it kind of brought it all to the surface, and it made it worse. And so I had to go through, I remember during that time, it was really hard for me, but it's kind of what you're talking about. I remember specifically that the thing that would help me was I would say to myself, all I can do is win today. If I think about, I've got to have a great marriage. I have to fix this. I have to be here a year from now. Now, those things are important. I wanted to have goals for a year from now, but at a certain point, I just had to throw my hands in the air and say, Grant, you can win today. That's all it is. It's just today. And then worry about tomorrow. You can win today. You got nothing to do right now. You're depressed about your marriage. Do the dishes for your wife. And taking myself outside of myself was the biggest distraction from any struggles I was having with depression. Doing something for someone else, it was like this secret I uncovered. Getting out of my own selfishness and out of my own head, getting out and doing something for someone else was a huge thing for me. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think training is the catalyst, right? Like, you know, we've all, you said you haven't had much adversity. I think you have had adversity, right?
Yeah.
You've had to get off opiates, which is extremely difficult. And you've had to probably repair a lot of relationships that I'm sure were very tarnished. Cause I know for me, that's still something that I don't think these people have regained. Right. But you know, for me, right, like I've spent months in the hospital. You know, my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia in 2016. As of recently, we've gone through a bunch of other stuff that's super hard. And everybody, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Everybody's gonna get kicked in the stomach. Everybody. And you know, it could be so many different things that could happen to you. But I think that what's in your control today is building a hedge financially, friendship, real relationships, obviously physical. I think those are things you could do today so that if or when life comes and kicks you in the nuts, you're at least better prepared for it,
I have one last question for both of you that came up in my head, and then we'll get this wrapped up. You first, Jason. What do you do with regret?
Well, I'm fortunate that in my life, I have not experienced, like, in my personal life, I don't really have much to regret in terms of like big things. I've had one girlfriend, one wife, we married, I don't have a lot of like those. I'd say in business, there's some things that I would say I wish I had gone differently for sure. And I think the justification there, and maybe this would happen personally too. I can't speak for that, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But in business, I've made decisions that when you look back and you're like, man, that probably wasn't the right move. But what gives me solace is that at that moment in time, thinking clearly, we made this decision. Because at that time, with the information we had, it was the right move. So like, how can you regret that decision if at that moment, with all the available information, you made the best decision you could at that time? And if you make your the best decision, if you make decisions based on that, not based on emotion, not based on ego, not based on anything else, but like with all the data, you say, hey, look, we've thought about this. This is the best course. If it doesn't end up being that way 6 months or a year from then, like, you really can't beat yourself up, because at that time, you probably would have done the exact same thing again. That's the way I look at it.
That sounds like that's another important reason why today, living in today, we need to look at those transactions that we have, those decisions that we make. We need to think about it from that aspect. And like you said, is this out of emotion? Is this impulsive? Because if you know that you're thinking clearly with a decision, whether it be a business decision, buying a house, buying this house, that house, is it too expensive for us? All these things that families face, right? If you're not doing it out of emotion or impulsively and you've added it all up, you're on the same page. If you mess up, you mess up, right? Mark, what about you? What do you do with any regrets you have in the past?
I really don't have too many personally at all. If I did, it would just be, spending more time with, with my granddad and just picking his brain with everything. But, that I could always say that about my other granddad too. But, anytime I feel like I would have regrets, it's just a stepping stone and a learning opportunity for me. I always look at everything that you can learn from everything that you do. And that's what I always tell my 12-year-old. I said, dude, if you get something wrong, guess what? You just learn from it and you get better from it. So I think I don't have, many regrets.
Well, darn it, guys. I was hoping you guys had something juicy for me.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We all have micro regrets, we'll call them. No, it's something that I wouldn't say has haunted me, but it's something you have to get past, right? And for me, it kind of became, I think I'm doing my best when I only look at it just enough to make sure that I don't make the same mistakes going forward. But I have to be careful not to gaze too long. If you gaze too long at your regrets and the consequences that come from those, sometimes permanent, that can make me depressed. So I try to just look at them for just enough time that I can learn from them and then throw it out, like almost give myself permission. Like, hey, your mind doesn't have to go here. You need to, you actually have an obligation to not think about this if you know that it's going to harm you, So that's where I've tried to go with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Guys, I honestly, I just wanted to get together as men and talk about some of these issues. I've heard you a lot, Jason, just talking about manhood, talking about fitness. We all love fitness. We all love CrossFit. I think you still love CrossFit, right, Jason? You love a lot of things. Yeah.
I love a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah. You're a little bit more diversified than us. I'm kind of still in my obsessed with CrossFit phase, but
that'll last for a little while. Yeah. It's good, man. Good.
I feel like jiu-jitsu is next. Like everybody I know, and I want to do it, but as a wrestling so I tried once in a wrestling background. It was the first like few weeks I was there, it was so awkward for me being on my back. I didn't make it through that initial phase. I had the same phase with CrossFit, but I didn't make it through the initial phase of discomfort. And I've been wanting to have another go at it.
Yeah, man. Stick with some privates. Start with some privates. get used to, you know, being on your back. Sometimes it's weird. It's different if you're a wrestler, and dude, you won't regret it. It's like investing in, you know, it's 6 months from now, you'll be like, wow. You know, I mean, I think while you're on the subject, you know, it's so funny. I recently had this video that came up with me and Tim Kennedy. I don't know if you saw this video.
I did.
And there's some people on there so this competition was fitness, shooting, and grappling. And you can go find it on YouTube. Just look up Tim Kennedy, Jason Khalipa.
Yep.
In the grappling portion, I'm humble enough to admit, I mean, I got my ass kicked, hands down. But you have some guys in there who are like commenting like, oh, this guy's not a brown belt, this and that. It's like, dude, they have no idea the level of violence someone can create who's dedicated their life to competing in MMA. And because I mean, I could just tell you, like in most gyms, most of the time, I'm perfectly fine. Yeah. With him, he made me feel like a kindergartner. And what I would share with any man out there is like, I think there's this false impression of how capable you would be with violence if you've never been exposed to it. You just, you like people will say like, oh yeah, I'd step up to the plate. Like, no, you won't, because you've never been exposed to it. And as soon as someone puts their hand on you, you just won't know what to do. And I would express that to anybody listening, because you really got to ask yourself, like, you know, it'd be like you getting in the ocean and just assuming you could swim. It's just not natural. You have to be exposed to it over time. And so I would encourage people to do so.
Yeah, I even remember in wrestling, which obviously is safe. Like, you're not getting beat in the face. It's not MMA, but I remember the mindset. There was still a weird thought of, this is my full strength against his full strength, and this guy's trying to take me out. It's just different. Like, you are fighting for your life in wrestling, even though you're not fighting for your life. And that did something to me where I was a little bit more confident if I was to run into a certain situation, but it's definitely something I want to keep up with. I do have a question about that grappling match at the end there on the last point. You had him there for a second.
I had his back.
You did. Do you have a wrestling background, or is that just from jiu-jitsu?
No. So, I mean, dude, it doesn't even matter my background. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Because he is so damn good. People just, there's levels to the game, and Tim Kennedy's on a completely different level. You know, he's probably top 20, at least as far as I'm concerned, grapplers like in the world. And his wrestling is good. His takedown's good. His timing's good. His everything's good. And he's a big guy. You know, he's 220 pounds. I mean, he's a big guy. So yeah, I it was a little bit unfortunate how that part ended up for me. If I can go back, I don't know what I would have done different though. I mean, I gave my best effort, and it just didn't work out on that particular area.
Yeah, I was rooting for you there. I'm like, oh, dude, he's gonna get him.
Well, spoiler alert! Don't. Just go check out the video.
Never mind.
Go check out the video, because there's more to it than the story to me.
There is, and it's very entertaining. So I do recommend that. All right, to wrap this up, Mark, you first. Anything cool coming up that you can announce? I think you do have one thing, and just what we got in the future for you.
Yeah. So, Uplift workout, the workout of the day, I guess, is September the 7th. Again, programmed by Adrian Bosman, and it's just kind of like a big community event. It's going to go down at different gyms across the United States. We do have shirt sales, and this is the shirt that I have on. Deadline for shirt sales to get them pre-ordered before the workout is July 31st. So that's coming up pretty quick. We also have different challenges going on. So the month of, what are we in, July? Brandon Luckett from the Imam Company has a challenge. We're giving away some Born Primitive shoes to the male and the female who has the best score. So Jason, definitely get after it. Next month we have J.R. Howell is programming a workout for us for the Uplift Challenge. Giving away a Blackout barbell gift card for $100 to the top male and female. September again is Boz, and then October Josh Bridges is programming a workout.
Oh, that's cool. JR, is that the JR from the podcast? Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, you get some cool people, man. That Bridges thing will be cool as well. Jason, you got to program something sometime. Do you still program at all?
What's that? Yeah, of course.
Oh, you guys will have to get together. He has somebody program the workout of the month every month. That'd be sweet if you guys could get together and do that. I'd love to get a Kalipa workout in there. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you could use one of our men's club workouts, you know. So what I do is so we have the gyms underneath the NC Fit umbrella. We service gym owners, And then underneath the Train Hard organization, we really help men and women train, protect, and provide. And I try and back that up every weekend by offering free workouts in parking lots. So we're going to start putting that out online. Like, so I do it on my own, right? I've been doing it for 45 weeks every week. But we're going to start putting it out on the Train Hard app, and it'll just be a free weekly workout that we're doing in a parking lot that men can do, or women, right? They want to get women together. That's fine too. It's just people ask me all the time, do you ever get any, crap from, do you ever get any pushback from women about just making it about men? I say, no. You'd be shocked at how many women are stoked that men are getting together to train hard because they're showing up for their communities better. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So yes, happy to program an Uplift workout men's club. And then if anybody listening is gonna be at the CrossFit Games, I'll be hosting the 7 a.m. and Friday and Sunday men's club. And Grant's coming, he said.
I am. So we've got that. We've got the Train Hard app. We've got your gyms, NC Fit. Anything else coming up, or is that about it?
Oh man, that's all I got.
Awesome. Dude, thank you guys so much. You don't know how much I appreciate it. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, just as men getting together and having this conversation. It's important to me. Couldn't be two better guys. I appreciate you guys. I am ending the recording now.